Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you are a returning subscriber, hello, friend. Hope you're having an amazing day. You look amazing. You're about to have the best day of your life. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts. Every episode, you get that bonus greeting. So hit that subscribe button. I am here with the one and only Mary Menard. How are you, Mary?
I am great today. Thank you, Nick.
Well, very excited to get you on. You have a very exciting background. You have a very exciting new job. So I'd love to just kind of dive in and hear a little bit about your story and how you ended up getting into this healthcare compliance and ethics game.
Sure. So I'm going to say I started like everybody else. I had no idea about compliance. It just wasn't anything I thought of. I started my career as a registered nurse, and I spent some years in a neonatal ICU for the littlest of babies. And then I went to skilled nursing facilities for the most dependent of adults. And that's really why I started kind of delving into ethics. You know, when you think about those preemie little babies and life or death, and the same thing on the elder side. So that sort of started it. And really, I think more even in long-term care, when I was looking at the quality of life that some of the older folks had, I was probably in the right place at the right time, but I moved from clinical care to the administrative side of healthcare. And so I worked with a direct to Medicare contractor at that time, looking at quality of care for Medicare beneficiaries, which primarily are older folks. So I was really looking at quality of care and utilization management. So this is when sort of managed care was growing. And I really thought that I might be able to contribute to improving quality of care for elderly patients. And so from a compliance perspective, anything you do with Medicare is following the rules, right? So way back then, it was following the rules. And then we expanded. It was a small company, and we expanded to incorporate Medicaid, which at that time was really sort of lower income, needy folks, a lot of pregnant women and children. And it was the same thing. It was access to care. It was quality of care. So I really think I started from a compliance perspective years ago, even though I didn't know it, it was following the rules. And then that sort of grew over time. I worked for a variety of companies and went off on my own. I was a Medicare hearing officer for a number of years.
Oh, wow. What was that like?
So that's really having to learn the rules. And so at the time it was, you'll have a provider on one side and like the Medicare administrative contractor, the carrier, the MAC on the other side. And, they were arguing about, was it medically necessary or should Medicare pay for it, that kind of. And so it's really knowing the rules and understanding the rules and making that determination.
And you can help them kind of sort through that.
Yes. Yes. But I was there to make the determination of, did it meet Medicare regulations or not?
Yeah.
So it was at that time, it was really understanding regulations.
And I'm sure that in that process, you got so much experience in hearing these arguments and hearing how one side or the other side tends to sort of craft their argumentative path to, get the outcome that they want. How did that experience end up informing your impact sort of later on down the road?
Oh, it's tremendous.
Yeah.
First of all, I never really knew what kind of case I might get.
Right.
I mean, you knew pretty much what the focus was going to be. We always had the OIG informing CMS and all of that. So you kind of knew, but still I could get almost anything. And so it was having to research that. And then it was sort of looking at the way folks were sort of arguing their case, which is interesting, Nick, because I'm seeing it today. One of the big arguments for Medicare years ago was how they extrapolated. And we all know today when there's a Medicare audit, depending on the kind of audit, they may extrapolate those results. In other words, they'll take a sample, say 100 cases, and they'll say you have a 10% an hour, make it up. Well, they'll extrapolate that so you have 1,000 admissions, and so they'll extrapolate that 10% over the 1,000, not the 100 they audited. And so years ago, they were arguing on extrapolation and was it valid? And we're still seeing that today, which is interesting.
Yeah, that's super interesting. What is the argument for it not being valid?
For what?
What is the argument for it for that approach not being valid?
Well, folks will say that Medicare didn't follow their own guidelines, or their guidelines are faulty. It's years ago, there was some validity to it. And as a hearing officer, I actually had to hire statisticians to go out and take a look at those for me to be able to, and I learned a lot from that too, by the way.
Yeah, I bet.
How to interpret those regulations. But everything that CMS does, Medicare, Medicaid, it's written down in regulation. So, I mean, if you follow what they say, and for the most part, they do stand up, but it's still an argument.
So you kind of swam in that pool for a while. You were kind of adjudicating these conflicts, these arguments. What was your next move after that, and what prompted you to make that next jump?
Well, at that same time, so while I was a Medicare hearing officer, I was also working with TPAs, that kind of group, to form HMOs. So we're going back to sort of when managed care was happening, HMOs were growing. And so I was in that space helping administrators with their, all of the documentation and forming the health plan, from quality committees and compliance and credentialing and utilization management, helping to hire staff, train, do all of that, then represent them, for example, at the Department of Insurance or the Department of Public Health to get their license as an HMO. So I was working in that arena already, and working with different sort of network group. So whether it was a physician hospital organization or a PPO, or preferred provider organization, or health maintenance organization, HMO, I was sort of in that field.
Got it.
And I've always sort of been in that field.
Right. You were talking a little bit about, or you kind of made this connection where, I was kind of in compliance and I didn't even recognize it because I was so focused on quality of care. And then you kind of step into it and you see that, okay, there are all these rules and regulations essentially that are scaffolding around the type of care that should be built within the healthcare system. Where have you seen that same dynamic play out in other parts of your, career or in other projects that you've worked on?
That quality sort of is falling into compliance?
Yeah, or vice versa.
Well, I got to tell you, I think that quality and compliance are hand in hand.
Yeah.
In fact, at one point, I almost thought at one point they would sort of join, just because they're very similar. I mean, it's all about quality of care, right? At the end of the day, it's about patient access. It's about quality. And in compliance, I tell folks, we're in compliance, yes, to obey the rules, but the rules are there for what?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
healthcare, the rules are there to protect the patient,
right?
Patient access, patient quality. So it's all about that. So to me, they're almost inseparable. And if you think about even where CMS is going, it's sort of compliance and quality. We work together, but they're now paying providers based on quality outcomes.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing this broad sort of like wave crash on the shores of our organizations where there's the shift from, hey, just have these rules in place to actually being able to prove the effectiveness and prove that these things are actually happening, which is a great last mile to finally be in. But it's just bizarre that it's taken this long for us to kind of shift the focus to this piece of the puzzle. You know what I mean?
And we're still not really there. I mean, we're moving there, but we've been moving there for over 30 years.
I know. Can we get moving here?
I kind of tell folks that you see things almost circular.
Totally.
It improves a little bit, but we're still doing the same sorts of things from a quality of care perspective, from a fraud perspective. We haven't gotten back from a coding perspective, from a documentation perspective. How many years have we said it's all about documentation? If you want to, get a claim paid, or even quality of care, it's about documentation because the person follows after you. They need to know what you've done. And we're still preaching documentation.
Isn't it wild?
I don't understand.
Yeah. What is it going to take, you think, for this tipping point to finally be hit? where we're not talking about this, where we're, someone is, it's some point in the future and we're looking back and we're like, man, remember when we were in that 30-year loop? It's so great to get out of it. What got us out of that loop?
Nick, I wish I knew. I'd probably be a millionaire. I don't know, because, when we got to the whole thing, we thought, well, electronic medical records are going to help us with that, because we couldn't read documentation. It was really difficult, right? When you had those paper medical records. And so electronic medical records was going to be that was going to be the cure-all for that. And it certainly wasn't, because there's always there around it. So we had the copy and paste, we had the save forward. And that was in some ways almost worse from a clinical perspective, because then we had documentation that really wasn't maybe accurate for the patient encounter at the time.
Yeah, I have this theory that any new technology, whatever good is going to come along with it, there's all these other negative externalities that are hard to be considered when that first thing is getting, chewed on and say, hey, are we going to implement it? And I think a good corollary to what you're talking about is over in kind of the finance game, where like mergers and acquisitions have happened for hundreds of years before Microsoft Excel came out, right? So, but now everyone uses Excel, and there are these really complex financial models. And the thought is that, well, now I have all these numbers on a page and I can very quickly get down to more accuracy. But what it actually introduces is a bunch more opportunities for more layers of assumptions. And obviously any outcome or output from a model is going to be a function of like those assumptions and how good those are. So you basically just increase the odds or the chance for a bad assumption to end up having an undue influence on the outcome that you end up, using as your basis for a decision that you run. So it's not like everybody just got Microsoft Excel and the quality of investments have just skyrocketed as a result. Right. It's probably kind of the same as it always was, because you have bad assumptions going in, you have bad models in place, you have more complexity. And so this, I guess what I'm saying is, these tools end up introducing a layer of complexity or a facet of complexity that we hadn't really considered before. And now we got a whole new slew of externalities that we have to sort of sort through to get to that quality outcome that we thought this thing was going to get us. It's a very bizarre paradox.
I agree. So what do you think is the way out?
Back to paper, probably. Just kidding. I'm kidding. I don't know. I really don't know. I think it seems to be a cycle that keeps repeating, because, I think an obvious answer that I almost gave was like, oh, we need AI. Well, do we? I don't know. I don't know what the externalities that are going to come from AI running all the coding. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I sure do. And then in AI, we have to build in ethics to that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Right. So the biases that we have can be built into those, these bots that are running across our systems and stuff like that. And that's just one example of this broader kind of dynamic that we're talking about. I don't know. I think it's probably, it's an interesting question. It's probably going to be like more people digesting the connection that you're talking about between sort of the policies, the rules, and the outcomes, this quality outcome. I think as we merge those and prioritize that higher than dollars in our systems, on average, I think that's what it's going to take to really hit a tipping point. But, I think as long as like dollars are the gods of companies, there's always going to be a propensity for this kind of stuff to happen. There's just a built-in incentive, because that, that quality of care or whatever is subservient to that top tier, that top of the pyramid, which is, the almighty dollar. That's what I think is probably at the root of it.
I totally agree with you. I was going to bring that up as you were talking about that. It is all about the dollar. And I think that's the hardest thing to fight through. And that's why we're seeing now, as we've been in this pandemic and, billions of dollars have been poured into healthcare, built into health payment, that we're seeing a lot more fraud.
Totally.
We knew that we would. And we knew that as we go through this pandemic, and if we ever get out of it, we'll really see how bad the fraud was, because so much money was involved. You have billions of dollars, and there's always a bad actor out there, ready. And so we're not going to get better from a fraud perspective right now at all. And from a quality of care, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have a whole other issue on quality of care that we could talk about for a long time, having gone through this pandemic and watched what happened, particularly to the elderly population, where they were isolated, where, they got COVID, some died, some didn't. They were injured. They were very sick, and then the staff was sick, so there was no one to care for them. And there's a whole issue about that, and then how we prioritized money for that as well.
Yeah, and there's this big dynamic kind of at play. There's a sort of a conflict of interest inherent to this broad game, because you have a lot of people that get into it on a practitioner side, on a nursing side, on people who are actually delivering the care. Why did they get into the game? Surgeons excluded. They're maybe driven by money, but a lot of people are trying to get in. No offense to surgeons. They don't listen to this anyways. We're fine. But they want to make a difference, or they have a heart to help people, or, you know what I'm saying? They want to make the world a better place. And what has happened is that this whole industry has erected that a lot of foxes that are surrounding this hen house are like, oh, there's a lot of opportunity in there. This is a messy game. We can come in and make some money. And so, that happens a lot on like the vendor side, right? There's a lot of these like vendor barnacles on this healthcare ship that are really just creating drag on how fast this thing can move toward, through the water towards kind of higher quality care. And so to the extent that these conflicts of interest exist in this market, there's going to be a continual deadweight loss that perpetuates over and over again,
And it's not just vendors. You say that people go into healthcare because they want to help. I believe that. As a nurse, that's why I went into healthcare. And I'm trying to help from the administrative side where I can. Mm-hmm. So my heart is with people,
right,
and their care. And it still astonishes me that providers are committing fraud against beneficiaries and patients. Just this past week, I read about a pharmacist that was indicted for selling fake vaccination cards. A physician was indicted for selling fake vaccination cards. We have nurses, we have doctors, we have therapists being indicted and charged for committing healthcare fraud. We have doctors running rings where, in fact, that was one of the things I worked with an OIG years ago, mm-hmm. In another state, looking at cases, and we're still seeing that today, where physicians are actually billing for services not even rendered. There's fake buildings, and they're just charging. And how do they do that? They went into this profession, I believe, with good intentions,
right?
And my husband's me. It's like, Mary, just because they're a healthcare provider doesn't mean they have morals or ethics. But it's just hard to fathom for me. But we still see it, and we're seeing more of it now.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I get your husband's point to some level, but I also get your point. I mean, no one is trying to choose between becoming a nurse and becoming a bond trader on Wall Street. You know what I'm saying? That's not in somebody's decision set. And I think, if you talk about the purpose of people that are in this game, it's about making a difference, like I said, or focus on people, like you said, or a heart to just make the world better. In the bond trader game, it's all about money and being a master of the universe. So the hierarchy of like drivers, or the hierarchy of priorities or purposes, are just materially different. And to your point, the overwhelming majority of people, I think, even who end up tipping the scale into this, malfeasance that you referenced, I would bet that the majority of those people weren't going to med school to game Medicare. At some point along the way, they took a bite of that, that poison apple, or they got jaded, or, when I was in school, I thought doctors made a ton of money. I get out and it's like, I got all these bills. The human mind is super adept at like rationalizing whatever. Right. So maybe it's just that like little baby steps. I don't know. But before you know it, they're always, they find themselves on the other side of the field, and people like you have to kind of clean up around it and try to correct for it,
It's again, it's just hard to understand how they get there, but you're probably right. They take that bite and it's tempting,
yeah.
And from a compliance perspective, it's hard to stay ahead of all that.
Yeah.
You need to kind of think like they would think. And so that's part of compliance, right? Trying to like, where are they going with this? What are they going to do next? What are they doing now because of the pandemic? What's going to happen?
Right.
And it's trying to stay ahead of that.
Well, you're somebody that, I haven't known you that long, but you're somebody who you just have like a really I don't know, you have a really like magnetic energy, and you've been in this game for a while, but you haven't gotten jaded by all this stuff you see around you. What's kept your heart, and what's kept you from getting jaded despite seeing all of this gamesmanship in the marketplace?
Wow. Well, number one, I've been in compliance, so I am on the other side of the table, right?
Okay.
Always trying to prevent it. And I don't know, Nick. It just wouldn't occur to me. It's just not in my DNA to do that. Probably that's why I'm a good compliance professional and a good quality person. It's not, I can't imagine doing that. I can't imagine trying to game the system or do something that would harm a patient. Again, because to me, at the end of the day, it's all about the patient. Even the money, if we're using somebody's Medicare card, illegally, and it's somebody else has stolen it or whatever, that's hurting that patient at the end, that beneficiary. They're now incurring all these bills and the stress of all that. So from a financial perspective, and then a physical and emotional, mental health stress on that beneficiary is huge. So to me, it just wouldn't occur to me. And again, it's hard for me to understand how people can go over that line, but they do.
Yeah, I guess what I'm asking is how do you not get jaded with respect to these people that you're supposed to be policing, quote unquote? Like, how do you not get to the point of saying like, man, there is just malfeasance everywhere. I have to really kind of walk around with the riding crop or the hammer or something. Is it that you see so much good mixed in with this malfeasance? Is it that, you just prioritize the patient, the patient experience above it? I guess I'm not suggesting why have you not like gamed the system. I'm suggesting
gamed it myself. Okay, how have I not gotten jaded? Because I want to do whatever I can do to prevent it.
Yeah,
I do. I want to be able to prevent it. And most people are good. Most people are good. And so I don't see the world as bad. I don't see people as bad. I see these as just it's a small subset of people.
Got it.
But it's what we focus on.
Right.
Because we have to. But it's a small subset. So I have all this energy about it and I talk about it, but it's not people in general.
Got it.
So we need to bear that in mind.
Well, that's an important frame, because I think the people who end up getting jaded by this, and a caricature of what I'm talking about is somebody who comes out of college and they want to get into human resources because they love people and they want to make the world a better place and all those kinds of things. And they step into an organization, and within some time period, they get to the point where they feel like their wings are clipped, they've been declawed, that they've like sold out, and they're just there to defend the organization, not help the human. Not be a resource for the humans, but actually to sort of govern and police the human resources or the human labor units in the organization. And I've seen that deterioration in folks, when they're at different points in their career. And I think there's a lot of magic in being able to preserve that heart, because that heart is what's going to really drive the effectiveness at the end of the day, because it's not about writing some rules on a paper, to your point. It's about actually changing behaviors. And if we don't understand the hearts of those hearts and minds that we're trying to actually affect and actually persuade, then we're just going to be ineffectual all the time. We're always going to have those wheels spinning,
And sometimes, and I've learned this years ago, sometimes you have to walk away from an organization. Not all organizations are going to change.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is. And you can try and try and try, but that's, I think, when you can potentially become jaded. If you stay too long in an organization that's a great point. No matter what, they're not going to change. It's not the place to stay, because you don't want to jade yourself. You don't want to do that to yourself.
Why is it?
That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Why is that such a hard connection for people to make? Is it a fear thing? Like they're scared to jump? Is it that they don't think it can be affected, and then before they know it, they have again, I'm very dramatic, but like a black heart, you know what I'm saying? Like, where does that, why is it so hard for people to guard their heart, so to speak?
I think it's hard, if you're in an organization that doesn't want to change and you try and try and try to change it, number one, you've invested a whole lot of blood, sweat into this organization. And I kind of compare it to a bad marriage. It's what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so you stay in this thing working and working and working because it's what you've been working at.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it might not change. I don't know. It might be fear of leaving. I don't know.
Yeah,
but I think that it's what you sort of get into that rut.
Yeah, you get into the rut. And then again, if you start to think that it's just like this everywhere, why should I leave? But, good on you for saying that and for guarding your heart, along the way, because you've seen a lot, I'm sure. You've seen a lot of this stuff that we're talking about. So I'd love to talk a little bit about, your new position. It's a very exciting position, it sounds like. It sounds like you're going to be a walking hat rack. You're going to be wearing a lot of hats. But tell me a little bit about it. Tell me about what you're most excited about, what parts you might be a little bit nervous about, or where you feel like you have a J curve to get up on. I'd love to kind of start there.
Sure. So on Monday, I start with CHS Therapy. And they provide therapy services, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech and language pathology in, ready for this, skilled nursing facilities and long-term care.
Perfect.
So for me, it really feels like a perfect marriage.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's going back sort of to the long-term care where my heart really is. And I have a whole story about why it's even more so now. And then therapy, truly, when I was a Medicare hearing officer, I heard so many therapy cases, and they're in need of compliance help. So it just sounds perfect to me. And they are a nationwide company, big company. They're growing very quickly. And so I think we'll be hearing a lot more about CHS Therapy.
Very cool.
So one of the things I'll be doing with them, several things, but is regulatory compliance. And that's a huge challenge in compliance, as you know, in any field, but particularly I think in healthcare, regulations are changing all the time.
Right.
And if you think back to, I don't know how much healthcare you've had your feet in, I know you do healthcare, but in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, when it was at its highest in 2020, regulations were changing so frequently that when we issued an analysis or whatever, we dated and time stamped that document.
That's nuts.
That's how quickly things were changing. And so, you think about telehealth and telemedicine and all that was changing and happening, but it really was changing sometimes day and sometimes several times a day.
Wow.
So keeping up with regulations is huge. And then keeping up with regulations at a state level is also just an enormous challenge. So I will be overseeing regulatory compliance, so regulations from a federal and state perspective.
Wow. You have to be like a surfer, right? Like a surfer, you don't know what wave is coming. You know that it's just going to keep changing. And if you're going to stay up on that wave, you have to be adept at adapting. And to your point, you're juggling different states, different federal regulations that are changing so quickly. It's not an easy task at all.
It is not. It takes a team. One of the things that I've actually done it for years and years and years and years, is every day I start my day, have breakfast, cup of coffee, and I go through the Federal Register. It just feeds in every day what's being proposed on the Federal Register, what's out every day. And I just look down the list so you get an idea of that. And then I go to the OIG and look at what they're doing. And it kind of gives you a good perspective of the general environment about what's happening. So regardless of where I am or what I do, that's sort of my daily, at least scan through. I don't necessarily read everything, but scan through to see what's happening.
Yeah, that's a great hack, actually. It just keeps you so in tune with what's going on, and you're not going to get caught off guard then. And if something that's particularly germane to your area pops up, then you go ahead and dive into that. That's pretty smart. Right. I'd love to dive into that story on why your heart is in long-term care.
Sure. So, I told you we worked in skilled nursing back then. So during this pandemic, my dad, several years, about 3 or 4 years ago, moved from Massachusetts to Pennsylvania to be closer to my brother. very independent man. He's got his little apartment, but it's in one of those over 55, 65 year, those facility things where he can also get assisted living if he needed it. Never needs it. So he goes through all of 2020 through the pandemic. And then at the end of the year, he gets COVID. And so he's independent. People don't know it. He has falls. He fell 4 times. He couldn't find anyone to help him. He ended up with multiple fractures, a hip, a pelvis, back. Jeez. He was in a hospital, went to rehab. Therapy helped him tremendously. He went back. We could not get him assisted living. They said, oh, he's independent. Don't worry about him. Well, he's not. He's in a back brace. He's got all these fractures. 10 days later, he was back in the hospital with pneumonia and sepsis.
Wow.
And then he went back to rehab, and rehab did such a phenomenal job with him. The therapists were phenomenal. And I've always been a believer in therapy, but what they did for this man was incredible. He went back to being totally independent. However, I'll tell you, at the end of the day, we need more regulations for assisted living facilities. I truly believe that.
Yeah.
Because it was really difficult to get him any assistance at all. When he went back that second time to a facility, an aide came out to wheel him from the car back into the building, and it was winter in Pennsylvania. She went fast, she hit a curb, propelled him, face planted him into the parking lot before he even made it back into the building.
Yowza.
Yeah. But there's no like rules. It's state by state that, you can hold anyone accountable for that. Anyway, therapy had to come back and help him. He's independent at the end of the day. Like I had to be. But I really, at that point, started really researching assisted living facilities and their regulations and what they're doing by state. And also long-term care. I've not worked on that for a long time, but really started researching that. Actually thought I would go into gerontology. I've got a great advisor at UAB right now. I really want to study more about elder care. So working with this company now is just really, it's a good place for me.
Yeah,
because it's therapy that was so helpful for my dad. It's skilled facilities, it's assisted living facilities. So I think that I'll be able to help them from a compliance perspective, but it's also going to help me grow from an elder care perspective.
Why do you think that elder care is so neglected from even a regulatory perspective?
So it's in a long-term care facility, it's very regulated. It is very regulated. So it's hard for me to fathom what happens. And I really think it's a staffing issue as well. They're so staffed. In my research and since this all happened with my dad, I mean, I'm looking at the kind of abuse that takes place, not only from a staff abuse, but patient on patient, resident on resident abuse.
Yeah, totally. It's crazy.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And you're supposed to report all these things, but at the end of the day, I just don't think that there's enough reported. Seriously, I don't think people report like they should report.
You're saying who's not reporting? You're saying like employees aren't reporting?
I don't think so.
No one?
I don't think so. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is just my opinion, Nick, but I really still think that, and I've seen it on surveys, people are still afraid of retaliation.
Yeah.
No matter how you slice it, people are afraid of retaliation. Hey, I was afraid of retaliation to report my dad's issue to the state, because in that state, they can ask him to leave if he rocks the boat.
Wow.
So
yeah, that fear of retaliation is that probably is the root of it. But I think, to your point, in this game, there's so many layers of where that retaliation can come from. And there's so many like far-reaching implications of the retaliation that are going to go beyond the person who's maybe making the report on and splash out onto the people that, that person cares about, which creates a very, difficult dynamic to sort through.
Right.
So, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna, I wanted to hear, I have this question that I love to ask, if you could go back in time and give yourself some advice when, you're just getting out of school, or you're just taking your first nursing job, knowing everything you know now, what's something you wish you would have learned earlier and digested earlier in your career?
Wow, I haven't had that one. I'm almost thinking, was it temperance, to be more, to listen patiently without reacting,
Okay.
to listen through. I think that's really important. I think sometimes when we're younger, we're not necessarily listening as we should listen. And I think being able to just sit back and listen and not take everything personally.
Yeah.
And I tell that to everyone who works with me in compliance, listen to it, but don't take it personally, because we're the persons that people are going to vent to if they're angry.
Right.
We're going to hear all sorts of issues. We're the ones they report to, but it's not us personally. I do not believe that anyone's attacking us. And so you have to have sort of that Teflon skin.
Mm-hmm.
So we deal with what we need to deal with on an objective basis, and just not from a reactive. It's not me, it's not us, it's not, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it can
I do know
feel
what you mean.
personal sometimes.
Yeah, and it's hard to sort through that, especially in this economy we're in now, which is really a knowledge work economy, where we are our work, and especially people who care a lot, just in general, they put a lot of purpose. There's a lot of intentionality behind what they do, and even if it's on a secondary level or a tertiary level, it can feel personal when you get, when you find that you've missed a mark or something. Yeah, that's great advice. I love asking this question because I can just soak up all of this advice myself. You know what I mean? So as we kind of get close to wrapping up here, I'd love for you to kind of pull out your crystal ball, and let's look forward 15, 20 years. How has this whole game changed? How has compliance merged closer with quality, and what are the implications of that from a patient care perspective?
So my hope is that it merges closer than it is. My hope for it is that compliance will be more proactive even than we are now, to always stay ahead of the game, particularly from the fraud perspective. I think we always need to stay ahead of that. But from a quality of care perspective, I believe that if compliance and quality really work more closely together, we're not opponents here. We're to work together.
Siblings.
Yes, but close siblings, not
Right.
Fighting siblings.
Twins. Yeah. Okay.
Depends on the kind.
Twins
of
who get
twins.
along. Okay, fine.
I've got twin siblings. It just
How
depends
you
on the kind.
Okay, fine. Close siblings is safer, but yeah, that's cleaner. Okay.
So I really believe that we can improve quality of care. And I say that with fingers crossed, because I've said it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be the challenges that we have to overcome. We just have to stay ahead of it. We have to, from a compliance perspective and a quality perspective, stay ahead of it from a technology perspective, from a regulatory perspective, from a patient care and treatment perspective. We need to always be paying attention to what's coming forward and be able to sort of, think ahead yourself and what might happen about this, and sort of
Right.
plan for that. That's my thought.
I love it. Well, I love your work, Mary. I love your heart. I'm super excited for this new role that you're starting. You're going to change the world and collapse that gap between quality and compliance. Where can people learn more about you? Where can they find you and reach out to you with questions or to connect?
Well, I am on LinkedIn at, I don't know my LinkedIn address. I should know that. But it's.
We'll put it in the show notes or something. Okay.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Okay.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really a lot of fun. And everyone, until next time.